Hello, and welcome to the first vlog documenting our showreel process. This vlog is going to quickly be discussing the scenes we have chosen and why we've chosen them. So the first script I have chosen is from BBC's Siblings, and the second is from BBC's Des. These scenes are going to greatly contrast in both the characters I'm going to be playing and the actual tone of the scenes, and I've chosen that deliberately because they're going to show polar opposite ends of my casting type for the showreel. One scene in Siblings has me playing Dan, who is a very laid-back and comedic character. He takes absolutely nothing seriously that goes on throughout the scene, and is really only in it to torment and show off, I guess, to his sister Hannah, after he has, fallen in love the previous night. And then you have great contrast with that. I'm also playing Dennis Nilsson, who was a real-life serial killer, although this is going to be a dramatised version of him. And he is more than happy in his scene during his interrogation to recount the crimes he has committed to the police officer that is questioning him. Now, Des was quite a big choice to make, but I decided to go for it on shooter feedback, which I got quite the nice direction that I really can fit these shiftier, sinister characters, and obviously I took that in an incredibly complimentary way. And that's not a very common casting type, especially in sort of my kind of student environment that you find. So I really do want to lean into that, because that could be quite the potential buy-in for some employers and casting agents. Initially, I looked at some police interrogation scenes just through like various crime dramas, but they were always very defensive, and the main energy of the scene is this person innocent, is this person guilty, it's playing on the mystery. What really attracted me into playing Des is that there is no ambiguity, because he's admitting to everything, and the stakes and horror of the scene come from the fact that he's admitting it very nonchalantly and very, gleefully. He admits that he's happy to get it off his chest. So I really wanted to use that when I found it, because I felt that there could definitely be very good potential in a showcase, a showreel setting for a scene like that. And it's going to be that contrast against Siblings, where I'm going to just be playing a very laid-back younger brother who was, well, riding the high of just having a foot job the previous night and wants to flex the fact that he got a date, with this very real and very gritty scene. And I'm quite excited to start working on that in the rehearsal process and really find the contrast, which will be discussed in the following vlog. Having now finished on the rehearsals for Siblings, I've found myself working in what is a very comedic role, and I've sort of had to revise myself on how I bring that kind of energy into a camera setting opposed to a stage setting with a live audience. I've worked as a tour guide for over a year now, and that tour mainly is filled with comedic elements. So I learned, well, more or less taught myself two important aspects of landing the comedy. And one of these translates very well into working for camera, and the other one doesn't translate at all. That first aspect that I found translated pretty well is just, it's rather obvious, but your delivery goes a long way. The second one, which doesn't translate as well, was inclusivity. When you're on a stage or when you're doing a tour, you've got an audience live in front of you, and what really helps in landing a joke in these kind of situations is including the audience in it, opening yourself out to them, gesturing to them, maybe referring to them. It eases them into laughing, what, in my opinion, is quite a cheap way to do it, but I found it was very effective. And you do not get that luxury in the setting of film. So a lot of the rehearsal process for Siblings, I was focusing on new ways to interpret this comedy and show this character. And I found a lot of that was going to come in his physicality. He's constantly on cloud nine, as a way of putting it. He's totally blissed out. He's had like the best night ever last night, and he only wants to gloat in front of his sister and sort of bait her into indulging him, while she is very stressed with what is, just taking care of their mum post eye surgery. So I really wanted to delve into Larbin efforts for that physicality. He's very laid back, he's very floaty, and that is ultimately what I came to the conclusion of, that he's going to be a float kind of character. And that is really well supported with Louise's performance, because she was very rigid, she was very precise in all of her movements and very frantic all over the place. And it was that big contrast is where that comedy is now going to be coming from, when you've got someone who is having the worst time versus someone who's having the best time and does not care for the other person's struggles. So I continued to develop my physicality further, and we began to use the environment and the setting to play into that. There's a lot of food out, and Dan mentions that he is very hungry, so it became quite natural that he's going to go and try and, snatch a piece of toast or something, and Louise, playing Hannah, is having none of that, slaps him away, and he acts very childish towards it, like, ow, to his hand, and then just moves on because he doesn't care and he doesn't have time to just stop and get stressed over anything in the scene. He never stops to check if it's okay that he can grab the food, and then the gag comes back because he just tries to do it again in the exact same manner and it's the exact same result. And that creates something that the audience can just laugh at. Overall, I think working on Siblings, it's definitely been a very fun, chilled experience, and that's the kind of energy I needed to get, so it was very pleasant to work on Siblings. And we will talk more about the contrast when I am working on Des. So we've now wrapped up the rehearsal process for Des, and I've gotten to start reflecting on what the challenges I faced in portraying what's a very serious and a very depraved character. I'm going to be drawing a few contrasts to the Siblings rehearsal, because in those rehearsals it was very laid back, it was very chilled, it was about comedy. But in this, it's the exact opposite, because Des was all about finding the horror and showing that through stillness and his calmness. My main direction for the character was to find the relief in the confession he is giving, rather than any kind of sick joy in it or an attempt at intimidating the detective. Basically every redirection I ever had, which I'm very grateful for, was finding his stillness and finding his relief in all of the dialogue, essentially just to take it all quite casually. There's phrases in this which is, like, he's talking about, I burned them, and I took no pleasure in burning bodies and chopping heads off and boiling heads. And it has to all be delivered with such this casual demeanour, and that is where the horror of the scene was going to come from. And that was, as an actor, it was very challenging to do that. As Dennis Nielsen, he was a real person, and I'm not playing it as a real person, because that is like a massive undertaking that, I mean, at this stage in my career, I'm probably not that ready for. So it was about making progress with his characterization, and I managed to make very strong progress with connecting to that with two activities. One of them I found a lot of help with was the Chekhov bubble, where you sort of, close your eyes and you imagine like a bubble around your character, and depending on who they are, it's got different textures and smells and tastes. And that really helped to envision his living environment, where he's got like human bodies in his house, and there's this disgusting scent that's going to come from that, and like this, like the taste of blood, sort of like, I envision that in my mouth, like that gross, rusty, metallic taste that human blood has. And getting that repulsion in my senses, it helped me a bit with the physicality of like he's straight up, but there's this underlying tension in him, like he's this coiled spring, and that I think that was really helpful. And the second activity, which really helped with my dialogue, my delivery, Niall actually came up with it. He just basically told me to blab to Tom about one of my interests and just tell him about, you know, like a game I like, and finding that energy actually really did help with the scene, because it's that sort of same kind of energy where he's just mindlessly yapping about these horrifying things that he's done, and it's so nonchalant, and it creates this real sense of horror for the scene of Des, and that's, I think, where I really picked up steam and I was really getting into the character. And I think it's, when we go into filming, it should, I hopefully, turn out really effective. So overall, for Des, it was all about using physical stillness, because I tend to be a bit of a jittery, moving person, and then just that casual, just blah blah blah, getting it all out there delivery, filled with relief, and just filled with just this casual demeanor in all of his words, that I really think is going to help create sort of this more horror-esque character, which ultimately is hopefully going to really help in my show reel, showing off my range as an actor. So filming for Siblings has now concluded, and I think the experience was actually very enjoyable and it was very fresh for me. I haven't done filming in that kind of manner before, properly being on a set and going through all these like different takes, and it really is this repetitive process, and that presents a lot of different challenges. Because we had to do multiple camera angles, and we were in quite a tight space, a very tight kitchen, and a lot of different things had to be decided on in the moment and added in. So in the circumstances, I always remembered to maintain my own professionalism. I had to respect the space because the set was actually someone else's house, and I just, you know, I treated it like I would treat my own home. We were also filming in a kitchen, and this was a very tight kitchen with not a lot of room for the camera and the lighting, and I mean, you know, it's more credit to the filming crew than it is to me, but we actually managed to work with that and improvise sort of on the spot, so I always made sure to just go along with whatever they needed, because, you know, that is very much their jurisdiction, and whilst, you know, I'm doing the acting, I also need to adapt to where that camera is and maybe change up a few things of my own. Biggest example of this on the day was, because of the tight space, and to actually get me in the shots in a consistent manner, keeping up that consistency on camera again, I had to be leaning sort of against a fridge, because anywhere else that you would have put me, it would have been like reflective surfaces or all these different things that could have posed problems for the camera. So they had me leaning against this fridge, and in the rehearsals, I wasn't planning on leaning against much of anything. So I had to change up how my own physicality worked on the day, just sort of mid-shoot, and to find less of that, you know, loose, just sort of like floating about the space, doing whatever, just, you know, using this fridge to prop himself up, and that further did still help to show the stuff I talked about in the previous vlog, of his attitude of not taking anything seriously, and I think it might have actually shown it better than if I was just stood straight hovering around all the food, where he's literally just using a fridge to prop himself up because he can't even be too arsed to stand on his own. And I think that actually really did add to the scene quite well. So I'd like to think that my ability to adapt to all the different challenges on set, you know, respecting the space, respecting the crew, following like the different acting directions I got and the more practical directions, really did help for a very smooth filming process at the end of the day, and it really did hopefully show off my own professionalism in that environment, and it will prepare me for being in that environment in the future. So we have now wrapped up on the filming process for Des, and you know, comparing it to Siblings, it was a very different filming experience, and I think in a much more positive way, because we were not filming on set in someone's house in like that tight kind of kitchen environment. We were filming in the studio at York College, which is a space that I know very well, and because we had all that different space and we were in the building, we also had some of the filming students and staff on the scene to help us a bit more directly. We had a lot more manpower behind the scenes, and it was because of that wider space we had to work with. I think it honestly was over before I even knew it. But that's not to say there weren't any challenges actually on set that I had to face and had to deal with. I maintained that professionalism that I maintained when I was working on Siblings, just, being aware, listening for things, and doing anything that I was told. A different challenge because of the wider space is because we could afford to have a lot more props on there whilst we were in the building. There was a lot of different wires around and a lot of potential trip hazards, and though we were informed of that, I do have prior experience when I was first getting introduced to working in a recording studio. We had like an hour and a half lesson a few years ago that just sort of detailed all these different hazards and how you manage them, how you manage yourself around wires. So it was always nice to put that experience to use, just, obviously to maintain my own safety and the safety of those around me. There was, on my part, a few concerns with continuity in Des, because I didn't properly learn the script, in full honesty. I at least not word for word, and sometimes I maybe use like a different connective or a different phrase or a different way of saying things, and there was someone working on the crew that said, hey, we've got some continuity here, that he says this here and he says this here, and in the script it's actually this. So whilst that didn't slow us down too much, it was quite an easy fix, and in the end I don't think it even massively mattered for the shoot. It has raised my awareness to the potential problems that something like that could cause in a professional environment, like, hey, this is the line and we need it to be said this way, and maybe you've learned it this other way. So that is something I'm going to carry on and be mindful for in the future. But overall, both of the filming experiences have taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about how the filming process actually works and how arduous it can be. Keeping up your stamina is very important, and keeping your attitude up is also just as important because it helps everyone around you. And our final vlog is going to be reflecting on the actual filmed pieces. So this will be the final entry of the vlog. This is going to be a quick reflection on my performance for camera, and now that I'm actually able to view the performance itself. So in Siblings, I think overall I had quite a good performance, but I could have had a lot more solid direction, specifically in the movements that I do. Mainly going to grab the toast, it looks very lazy, and I know like in the scene he is supposed to be lazy, but it looks lazy in the fact that myself just didn't care. And I think if I was more direct in that, really showing like, because he's really hungry, and like he really goes to snatch, instead of just sort of sauntering over, getting my hand slapped, and then just sort of slowly retreating like I did in the actual video. On most of my appearances, this was mainly just to the constraints of the environment, were on just one side of my face, mainly the left half of my face, and I feel like I could have used a wider range of expressions in that, and to really just show off the emotions when I'm not speaking, perhaps, or to enforce what I'm saying as well. Now, in Des, I can go a bit more into it because I feel like I had a lot of a better showing, both on camera and myself as an actor. I had, I think, really clear choices in that, and I think it really got across that, like, more scary kind of vibe that I really wanted to get. Although I did notice in Des, because it was a lot more focused on me, my eyeline darts around a lot, and that is something I'm semi-aware of, and I'm more aware of it right now, so I'm going to have to really try and focus my eyeline, because especially on camera, the eyeline is everything. And when it's looking around so much, and it's like looking for different things, which I'm not fully conscious that I'm doing, but it really does get distracting, and it gives off a different vibe that maybe he's more anxious than he is calm, which is what I was properly trying to portray. So to improve that in the future, really just focus on my eyeline. Now, overall, I've quite enjoyed the filming experience. I think it's taught me a lot about the process and the professional standard, and is, on reflection, shown me a few things I can improve on in the future.